Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report. ESG, woke workplaces and dangerous investing. I'm your host, John Solomon. Tonight, in partnership with our sponsor, Heritage Action for America, we are going to explore how liberal activists and their allies in corporate boardrooms are trying to hijack financial investment decisions to support liberal climate policies and stamp out fossil fuels. The end result is that such companies are focusing on ideology and politics rather than customers, products, services, and returns to investors. There's a growing concern that this movement, known as Environmental, Social, and Governance Movement, or ESG, is putting Americans' hard-earned investments and retirement funds at risk. Those concerns have quickly spawned a counteroffensive from the halls of Congress to state houses across America. Tonight, we are going to explore the very real concerns about ESG, including evidence that its proponents are trying to move America further towards a social score system enacted in communist China. We're also going to explore the emerging solutions driven by grassroots activists, federal and state lawmakers, governors, and treasurers across this great country. Our guests tonight are on the front lines of this historic fight. People like Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, who recently signed into law legislation that prevents his state government from investing in firms that discriminate against oil and natural gas producers. Oklahoma is now pressing 150 fund managers and financial institutions to disclose their ESG stance before deciding whether they'll get future state business. Now, later in the hour, we'll catch up with some of the brightest legal minds and most active grassroots leaders on this front. People like Heritage Action's own Jessica Anderson to discuss the ongoing efforts to eradicate the ESG agenda out of our businesses and out of our daily lives. But first, we turn to a U.S. Senator who has introduced landmark legislation to block President Joe Biden from enacting ESG policies at the federal level. He also hails from a state that is working toward banning ESG as well. He is Senator Mike Braun from the great state of Indiana, and he joins us right now. Senator, great to have you back on the show.
Hey, good to be back on.
Before we dive into your very important legislation, which is gaining momentum every day, I want to just say we know a lot of Americans are still trying to get their arms around ESG. I want to ask you, just in your own terms, what is ESG and why is it so concerning?
So I think maybe the best analog here is look at what has happened in school boards and in education across the country. I was on a school board for 10 years back from 04 to 14. We weren't wrestling with critical race theory, kind of indoctrinating. It was about educating. And there's so much of the other side of the aisle that they want to weave in to the fabric of our country when they've got these big levers that they can exercise out here in DC. And when you can't legislate it, you do it through rules, executive orders. And I've gone through this, and we had real results here 3, 4, 5 months ago when the craziness of trying to force employers down to 100 employees of making their employees get a vaccination, that was government gone wild. And if you remember then, I got a couple Democrats on board. It passed the Senate. Of course, Pelosi was not going to bring it up in the House, but a few weeks later, thank goodness the Supreme Court weighed in and got rid of that nonsense. So here, it's just another version of how that works. And this, a little more in a sneaky way. When you give your money that you earn to any investor advisor, that's that fiduciary responsibility. And you would hope that the main and only criterion would be get the best return on investment, not contingent upon what the ideology or the politics of the day would be woven into how that fiduciary responsibility would invest your funds. This has taken that same tool, the Congressional Review Act, the CRA, which is how you fight back through Congress when you get a Congress that can't get the law passed, but then the president through the executive branch wants to start doing it in ways that come in the back door. So I, again, have all Republicans on this, Joe Manchin from West Virginia, and we need one more senator from the Democratic side of the aisle. I think there are 4 or 5 of them that got to look at it seriously. Then it passes the Senate. The good news this time, the companion bill being offered by Andy Barr should pass the House. Then President Biden would have to veto it. And that is where you really make a statement. And the courts could always weigh in as well somewhere down the road.
Yeah, such an important movement. And it's rare to see this level of support for a piece of legislation right out of the box. 49
Yep.
members you mentioned already, one of them a Democrat, Joe Biden. Also, 100 groups have also gotten behind this bill in a very quick time. This is a grassroots movement. How important is it for everyday Americans, grassroots folks, to get behind this and have their voice heard?
If we don't do it at the grassroots level, you can see how the political enterprising happened over the last 2 years. And since I've been here 4 years, the other side of the aisle is faster footed than we are generally. They never let a crisis go to waste. Look at all the money that we borrowed and spent with kind of the woke policies in many cases that went along with it. And if we don't fight back at the state and local level from the grassroots, you can be rest assured that the political enterprisers will either do it legislatively or through executive orders. They've proven that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's exciting to watch the conservative grassroots get more and more organized every day now, though. You can feel that sense of critical mass growing on the conservative side. You've thrown your hat in the ring, obviously, for Indiana governor. You have a state that's also trying to do at the state level what you're doing federally. Tell us a little bit about the debate in Indiana, why it's so important that Indiana take the lead on this.
Well, I think the states are going to be the laboratories across this country that weigh in on stuff like this, craft the solutions for even the broader problems that we face, like, say, the high cost of healthcare, which is generally always there. I tackled it in my own business 15 years ago. And they're going to even, weigh in on issues like a open border, because that's impacting every state, especially the ones that have to deal with it in the proximity of it. But states have got to raise their voices. Our state is going to do that. And they're trying to make the argument that you could get a lower return by restricting the flexibility of going into ESG type investments. But the data is all out there. When you've looked at it, it's cost investors through their fiduciary agents that invest this money probably closer to a 2% less return. And when I'm talking about 2%, that would be, say, of an average 8% return you might get. That's a 25% difference. There shouldn't be any criterion, and the states like Indiana are putting that out there, other than best return on investment financially. Quit trying to weave in ideology, woke ideas, and I'm glad Indiana's stepping out, and don't buy the fact that that could hurt returns. We're for, and I'm for, basically being honest with investors through that fiduciary relationship, and you should not be getting that kind of criterion, which is off the mark, where you're pushing things outside of the return on investment. Oil and gas stocks, for instance, have been the best returners of any, and they are not investing there, and they're costing real returns in the process.
It is remarkable to think that we've gotten to a point. You bring such a unique perspective because you ran a business for a long time before you ever got into politics. How did this mindset start creeping into the corporate boardroom, into the corporate executive C-suites, that rather than keep our focus on our product, our service, our customers, and the required return on investment we owe our investors, we're just going to play politics? How did that creep in? How do we force it back out?
Well, it's the good news is it's not rampant everywhere. I come from Main Street. I'm an entrepreneur. These large, especially public companies, I think sometimes even get detached from their main stakeholders, their shareholders. And even their shareholders, I think, are starting to get disturbed by where these board of directors are taking the companies. But no, that's the new alignment in this country. Big corporate America with a lot of the coastal elitist points of view. I'm one that wants to be engaged in the tough issues of the day. I'm a conservationist, for instance, on the climate issue. We need to be engaged as conservatives so you don't get walloped with crazy stuff like the Green New Deal. We can't be On the outside, on those critical issues, I'm for reforming healthcare. I don't want Bernie Sanders to take it over. So it's not like we, as Main Street entrepreneurial conservatives, aren't interested in the big issues of the day. We just don't want it to be directed by large corporate boards and coastal elitist political points of view. Big difference.
Yeah. And just real quickly, so we got about 30 seconds left. The China social scoring system, it seems like the proponents of ESG, that's their end game here. Most Americans need to be educated on that, don't they?
They do, because that whole interplay, then when you bring that topic in, it even gets more complicated for all the geopolitical reasons that are intertwined with that. This all comes from the same foundation. Where do we want our country coming from? Main Street, states, and localities, or you want it being driven from the federal government top down? It'd be different if they were knocking anything out of the park.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, one thing the constituents of Indiana know, Senator, you're fighting for them. You're fighting for their paycheck and their wallets to make sure that they're treated fairly in any investment they get. A lot of excitement about your legislation. We're going to be covering that closely over the next few months. Sir, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great honor to have you on. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. When we come back, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt talks to us about the impact of the legislation he just signed that is beginning to put all investment firms in his great state on notice. They got to focus on return on investment, not on politics. We'll have that right after this commercial break.